from so many different places. This is actually a very geographically diverse audience. So I'm gonna ask for a show of hands here if you are from Zapata County. Raise your hand if you're from Zapata County. Okay. Raise your hand if you're from Webb County. Anybody from Webb County? So we have a couple of people from Webb County. Thank you for coming. Okay, how about Jim Hogg? Anybody from Jim Hogg County? Hey, Jim Hogg. All right. Anybody from Duval? No. Okay. How about Star County? Star County is represented. How about Hidalgo County? Yes. Okay. So Hidalgo County, I think, is going to carry the day. From any other county here? Anybody? The Nueces County. Yes. And Cameron County. Okay. Thank you all for being here. So this is the way it's going to go this morning. This is a storytelling session this morning. So we have three guests who are here, and then a fourth who will be joining us during the course of the talk. I think that Hector his GPS maybe wasn't working this morning. But the way it's going to go this morning is that you already saw them here. You saw the folks up here already engaged in a little bit of storytelling. But Mr. Martinez, do you want to go first, or is there an order here that you all prefer? He goes first, and then should we go? The flow or the PowerPoint. And so that was, Diana, you go first then, right? In the PowerPoint? Yes, okay. And she said it with such, yes, of course, come on, I'm first. Who else is going to be first? So Diana Uribe does not need to be introduced, eh? ¿Verdad que no? Because she is famous all over town, I think, in San Ignacio. And so Diana Uribe is a lot of things. She has so many credits to her. She came to the museum about, I don't know, maybe a couple months ago on Mother's Day. No, but you've been here before. And so she gave a scintillating talk on, family history and on her mother. And so she is a gifted storyteller. She will begin this morning with a story of herself and the family. And then we will move on to, I think it was Anna. Anna, were you second? Yeah, and so yes, and then Anna, and then Mr. Martinez will be third, and then if Hector shows up, then Hector will bring the tell into this. Okay, so before I turn the microphone over to Diana here, is there anything that anybody's thinking here, or a question that you may have, a curiosity perhaps, una inquietud quizás, that anybody wants to say before we start? Yes, Robert Ramirez. So I'm going to give you the microphone so that people who are on Zoom can listen.
Time it for 30 seconds. But anyway, I was thinking, you know, they one thing that they brought with them, which was so important, is the knowledge of how to run cattle, how to live off the fruits of raising cattle and goats and that sort of thing. But I thought, well, now they get, if that brushland doesn't look like a very nice place for cattle to feed. So I thought, what are the cattle eating, and how are the cattle being raised in this very harsh environment? That's my question.
So Robert asked this question because of his own personal story. Because Robert's grandmother, Emilia Junior Ramirez, wrote a book entitled Ranch Life in Hidalgo County. And so she dated it, right? It was from I think like after 1853. That's right. And so that book has had great currency. In its original edition, it had great currency, and then Robert took it upon himself to reissue the book and republish it, and with new illustrations and that sort of thing. So he's coming at this, and so I'm curious to know here, as you listen to the stories, where is she coming at this from? Like, just this one simple question. Viene de la abuela y de las familias, and also a curiosity this morning. Thank you, Robert, for setting us up with that. Diana?
Thank you.
So as you speak into the microphone, yes,
Can I stand up?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
And you can come to the podium and like,
Okay.
and you have the clicker there, so that you can
Mhm.
move the arm.
No se me vaya muy lejos, Dr. Guajardo. The beauty about schedules is that they can be flexible. And this morning's schedule is going to be very flexible. So we were going to present these books at the end, Dr. Guajardo, but I'm going to do that now before we get started. My cousin Victor Manuel Ramirez Uribe, who is fifth generation descendant from Blas Maria Uribe, gifted these two books in honor and in memory of his mother, who is the author. Ninfa, Tia Ninfa, actually is a sister of Hector Uribe. And so this remains within the storytelling. History has two venues. One, it's written. And we can see that because we've gone to caves and found hieroglyphics that tell the story of life among the indigenous people in that area. And it has to be factual, it has to have a chronology, but it's not necessarily objective. The other one is oral stories. And those are my favorites because those you can embellish. And these are oral stories that my tia Ninfa wrote about her siblings. And the book, Dr. Ojardo, if you would please, the book is titled The Music, the Magic, and the Memories. And she tells beautiful stories about her siblings in the early life in San Ignacio. And these two books are gifted by my cousin Victor Manuel to the museum. Tia Ninfa lived to be 104. And she was still telling stories up until the week before she passed away. I'm not very technically knowledgeable, so I'm going to ask you to do the PowerPoint for me. This is my daughter. I can still ask her to do stuff for me. Oh, there I am. Okay, then let me turn around this way. Okay. The Vasquez Borrego land grant was responsible for a lot of the land that was ranched and developed in Zapata and Webb counties. On the left side, you see my grandfather, Primitivo Uribe, grandson of Blas Maria Uribe, and his wife, Juliana Villarreal Uribe. His ranch was called El Espejo. And that's my daddy, Pedro Pablo Uribe. And every cowboy has to have a good cow dog. So that's Pinto. Now, if you were reading Dick and Jane, his name would be Spot. We have many, many memories. And I know my brother can probably tell me, Diana, you didn't tell that story right. My brother was sitting in the audience, by the way. Um, but how many of you know what that little tub on the left side was used for? Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And Elia said that. How many of you bathed in one of them? Oh, we're aging ourselves. Yes, Daddy had one at the ranch, and my mother made sure that there was plenty of hot water. They would warm up in La Chimenea. So she put that in front of the fire, in front of the chimney, and that's where she would give us our baths. My younger brother didn't use one of these. His was a little bit more modern. It was porcelain, well, not porcelain, enameled. This one wasn't. His was. What about the item on the right-hand side? It's a grindstone. We thought it was a toy. It was stored in the tack room, and when we go to the ranch, My daddy would take it out and put it on the breezeway between the two casitas. Our ranch there had the kitchen and the bunkhouse with a tack room attached to the back of the bunkhouse. A tarima is a mesquite wood table, not very high. And my mother would put some quilts out there. And after we'd gone hunting for pitayas in the season, and I understand that this is a good season for pitayas this year because my cousin has sent me pictures. So we'd go hunting for pitayas. We'd come back to the ranch, and with a little twig, we'd take off the thorns, the espinas. My grandmother would rinse them and put them in the refrigerator. And then we would take our little snack of cold watermelon, tiene que haber sandía, and pitayas and take a nap. But by then, we'd already played on the grindstone. We'd sit up there, and that was our stationary bike. I think was a prelude to it. I am so sorry. It's my alarm clock. It just gave me away of the time I normally get up now that I'm retired. Be careful with technology. It will tell on you. And another memory that I have, and I know that my brother and my son, who is also here, have that memory as well. My son Rene was lucky enough to have spent some time in the ranch. But we would go and watch Daddy leave the salt lick blocks out there for the cows. And Daddy would drive around, and you asked how they fed the cattle. Well, they had chamuscadoras, and they would burn the pear. Now, I'm not quite sure how that worked back in the late 1700s and 1800s, but I know that I got to see Daddy burn pear. And I would sit on the tailgate with mascarote, pellets. And that was a combination of sorghum and other things. And the cows would gladly follow. And I was just so happy that they didn't bite me. And I would put out my hand, and they would take it right out of my hand. And I thought I was so special because the cows would come up to me and I could feed them. Didn't know that Daddy was using me to take the cattle back to the ranch from being out there in the brush. That is the brand Uribe Primitivo, Uribe Pedro. My brother has those. And they're sitting on an old slide swing that belonged to my grandmother. We used to sit outside and enjoy the evening breeze and watch the sun come down. And I didn't tell him that I was going to put him up on the screen. But we're celebrating his birthday in the 1960s. And that's the way we celebrated birthday parties. We didn't go to places with trampolines and arcades. We celebrated in our backyard with a cake Mom had made. That town square is called Blas Maria Uribe Plaza. That's how it looks today. It wasn't always like that. I remember, I don't know if you remember Omar. My other cousin just arrived, Omar. Hi, Omar, and his daughter, Maria Teresa. It used to be just rock. And that's where the young boys, would play softball. And San Ignacio was famous. I think it was the Bluebirds. San Ignacio was famous for their baseball team. They would win when they would play against other teams in Laredo and maybe Zapata and Rio Grande. But that was built in the about 1980s, más o menos. But before that, like I said, it was just an open space. And a scene from Viva Zapata was filmed there. Marlon Brando was in San Ignacio, yes. So San Ignacio was known in Hollywood. And then we didn't have running water until the 1960s. We took baths. We just didn't have running water. That is our water tower. And it proudly says the name of our little town, San Ignacio. Prior to that, I don't know if you have memories of this, Mercurio, maybe you do, Omar, Manuel Vidauri had his water truck. He would go down to the river, pump it into his water truck, and deliver water around town. Now, when I got to high school, I was spoiled. Daddy didn't want his little girl to go to the outhouses anymore. So he put a big tank on stilts, and we were able to run water into the house until eventually there was city water, and you could just open the faucet and you had hot and cold water. That is our church, Nuestra Señora del Refugio, named for the patron saint of Revilla, what is now Nueva Ciudad Guerrero. And that church was built by Blas Maria Uribe at the request of his wife, Juliana Treviño Uribe, the oldest daughter of Jesus Treviño. They used to have priests come around 2 or 3 times a year, and services were offered in her home. And you will see that in a little while. And she said, no, I want a formal place where the priests can perform the Mass. They would come 3 times a year. They would go to the cemetery, pray over the graves. They would have marriages, and sometimes a marriage had already taken place. But they would formalize it when they would come to town and do baptisms. These were the oblate priests. And this is the customs house. We're going to talk a little bit about trade in San Ignacio and why San Ignacio became a major port of entry back in the late 1800s. And it was important enough that the federal government established a official entry into United States across from San Ignacio, Mexico. La Casa de Aduanas still stands there. It was dedicated and made a historical landmark in about 1990. It became a residence eventually, but it prides itself in being the oldest original customs house still standing from Brownsville, Texas, all the way to San Diego, California. So if you want to know what to see in San Ignacio, I've already given you a few things to see. Before any of this could happen, a lot of things had to be in place. The Rio Grande River, el Rio Bravo, el Rio del Norte, originates in the San Juan Mountains in central Colorado. It comes down the southern western part of Colorado across New Mexico and enters Texas at what is now El Paso. And it continues its flow across Texas, well, on the border side of Texas, down to the Gulf of Mexico. It travels 1,887 miles, and it is called the fourth longest river in Texas. That river was a source of life for indigenous plants, animals, and people. The earliest record of people in this area that I'm showing you dates back to 11,000 years. That is a beautiful outlook point that is located right before you get to Meekum Ranch, about 3 miles north of San Ignacio, traveling toward Laredo. And that is the Rio Grande as it flows towards San Ignacio. This shows you the different towns that came into existence because of José de Escandón, known as the colonizer of South Texas. Spaniards began to arrive in the early 1500s. They began to explore and claim the land for Spain. And everything was fine until they began to see an influx of immigrants from the northern part of the United States and the French coming in from Louisiana on the eastern part of the state. The royals in Spain were afraid that they were going to lose claim to Texas, and so they began to have soldiers that had been already with titles. They had a history, and they had royalty titles as well. Those were the only ones who were given permission to come and settle in the area. One such man was José de Escandón, who had traveled to the New World at the age of 15 and gradually established his military prowess. As he went along, some of the towns, go back just a little bit, Laura, please. He settled Laredo, Rancho Dolores, Ciudad Mier, and Ciudad Revilla. And Revilla gets its name from a town that he lived in Spain. Eventually, Revilla changed his name to Nuevo Ciudad Guerrero, but a lot of the inhabitants of South Texas in this area come from Revilla. When Jose de Escandon began settling in this area, Jose Vasquez Borrego developed an interest. And so he petitioned Jose de Escandon for some land, and he brought about maybe 13 families to the area. Rancho Dolores was already there, but what he did is he promised Escandon that he would build a ferry and give it some protection from his own workers who were commissioned as soldiers. Unfortunately, the area around Rancho Dolores was not safe enough. There were a lot of raids. It didn't fulfill its role as a port of entry. And we traveled southward towards San Ignacio. In around 1830, or in the 1820s actually, Jose de Escandon was petitioned by Jesus Trevino for land in San Ignacio. So he purchased some land on the north side of the river, and he built the, a ver, Laura, one more. He built the Casa Mayor. That is the oldest structure in San Ignacio. It is built of local sandstone. The walls are 16 inches thick. And as you can see, there are no windows. And that was for the protection of the inhabitants of the home. But you do see the gun ports at the top, las troneras. The roof was flat, and so you could lay on your belly and place your gun in there and protect your property and your family. This was in 1830. In around this time, in the 1820s, a widow, Ignacia Gutierrez de Lara Uribe, married to Jose Dionisio Uribe from Revilla, crossed into the northern part of their property and settled in Uribeño. She had two sons. One was Martin, and the other one was Blas Maria. Blas Maria ended up in San Ignacio. Okay, where is my technical assistant? Okay. This is part of what Blas Maria added. He added the building running east to west from the river toward the highway. And that is the main entrance. And you cannot really see it from here, but these were very advanced architects, really. Alongside, on each side of the main entrance, at an angle, you have very polished stone with a strategic little hole in the wall so that the rifle would be at an angle. And then if anybody came to that main entrance, you could protect it from the inside and know who was at the door without having a smart doorbell. Oh, no ring, no. The on top is that I always forget the clock. Go back a little bit, Laura. In 1871, that timepiece was added, and it still stands, and it is off by only 6 minutes. It still tells time. He enclosed the courtyard. Blas Maria Uribe and his wife, Juliana, had 6 children, 5 sons and 1 daughter. By the 1870s, this is the inside. Chris was going to be here. Unfortunately, he became ill and he couldn't join us. So you're going to get the Diana Uribe condensed version of the fort. Chris was going to talk about the architecture and the Spanish colonial that we see in the houses in San Ignacio. This is in La Cocina. It has the original fireplaces that are still used throughout the year. The River Pierce Foundation purchased the fort, and through grants And I believe with some assistance also from the Guadalupe and Lilia Martinez Foundation, they were able to refurbish this fort to its original integrity. You can walk in, and there is one room that still has a dirt floor. And it has a door that hangs on hinges. Everything is made of mesquite. There is no hardware, and they're cogs. The hinge of the door is mesquite, and it opens beautifully. The buildings were built in such a way that when they opened the door in the front and in the back, you had that breeze coming in. And when these buildings would cool down, they stayed cool. And when they were warmed up, they stayed warm. The stone was thick enough to do that. In 1998, it was declared a National Historic Landmark. It is worth the trip to come down into town. Anybody driving by San Ignacio, if you don't look toward the west, you've missed it. And you've missed a wonderful opportunity to see the oldest town in Zapata County. In the 1950s, and Mercurio's dad was instrumental in this, Mercurio Martinez and other people from the Zapata County area, Guerrero, worked to declare the river in the Falcon area a man-made lake, Falcon Lake, and to build a dam. President Eisenhower drove through Highway 83 past San Ignacio. Now, I don't want to be a name dropper, but I've already said Marlon Brando, and now I've said President Eisenhower. So we might be on the banks of the Rio Grande, way out there, but we are known. There was a strong, and I'm going to stop right here because it's not in my notes. And as you can tell, I haven't been following my notes. I never do. I want to recognize my cousin Hector Uribe, who arrived, and we got to see him safe and sound here with us. There was military presence in San Ignacio. And it was published in 1892 in the New York Times. So we've traveled from the West Coast to Washington up to New York. And San Ignacio is in the news again. The Mexican soldiers crossed the river to the north. And by this time, it was already officially part of the United States. And there was a skirmish. The Mexican soldiers were chasing runaways. And we did have U.S. soldier presence in San Ignacio. During the Confederacy, we have Confederate soldiers chasing the famous Juan Cortina, the Robin Hood of the Southwest Texas. Juan Cortina didn't want outside presence, especially in this area. He wanted it to remain Mexican in population. And he would steal, but he would give to the poor. But he would also commit crimes, and he was a sought-after outlaw. At this point, I am going to turn this over to Ana Gonzalez. Ana is the niece of Guadalupe and Lilia Martinez. Her mother and Tia Lilia, see, Tia Lilia was my teacher when I was in San Ignacio. She was our principal. Very beloved lady. Ana's mother and Tia Lilia were sisters. And Ana is now instrumental in continuing the legacy of Tio Lupe and Tia Lilia. A legacy that is not just about ranching, family, and heritage, but about education. Ana graduated from the Texas Christian University with a degree in radio, television, and film, and went on to have a career in television that has spanned over 20 years. During this time, she has worked in commercial television, sports broadcasting, and local government programming. Ana has won numerous state and national awards for producing, editing, writing, including 2 Lone Star Emmys. Her experience in television, sports broadcasting, philanthropy, volunteer management, and local government allows her to fulfill the mission of giving back to the community, both in North and South Texas. Ana is on the board of directors of the Guadalupe and Lilia Martinez Foundation. serving as a secretary and involved with community relations succession. She is also in charge of ranch operations, educational opportunities at Rancho La Union. Ana can be reached at ana@glmfoundation.org. And today we are fortunate that she can be reached here. So there will be a time for questions and answers at the conclusion of the presentations. And I know that there will be questions for Ana because she is supervising great things happening at Rancho La Union. Ana?
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Thank you so much for having me here. And I think when my dad got the phone call about this, we were just so excited because this is the first time we've ever really gotten a chance to present like this, the history of the foundation. And here I have all my notes and things like that. I know I'm here to talk about the ranch, and I'm going to segue a little bit because we've got a lot of videos to show, which kind of talks about what we've been doing. But I did want to back up a little bit because as you were telling your story, it reminded me of so many things about San Ignacio that my great aunt and great uncle have done. And let me do a little bit of a correction and just a little bit of history. It was my grandmother is Mary Sandlin, and her maiden name is Gutierrez, and she is sisters with Lilia Martinez, who is Gutierrez. So that side of the family is actually, and I know what I'm talking about, I'm just so nervous right now, is actually Gutierrez Ramirez's, who are also land owners, but we're segueing, obviously, talking about the Uribes today. And then my mom is Shirley Sandlin, and she passed away last year from lymphoma. But during this time when Lupe and Lilia, they were not able to have children, they were did a lot of great things in San Ignacio, Rancho La Union. And when it was time for them to get their estate and affairs in order, they said they wanted to give back to the community. And that is how the Guadalupe and Lilia Martinez Foundation was established. So we were incorporated in 2001. In 2003, Lilia passed, and in 2006, Lupe passed. And during this time is when we have become the family foundation that we know. It's run by, unfortunately, my mom did pass last year, but my father is Bob Gonzalez, my brother, my son, my niece. It's literally a family foundation run by 5 of us. So talking about San Ignacio a little bit is my notes, because I'm adapting as you were speaking and in doing some education as well, is when you do go through San Ignacio, you will see the Guadalupe and Lilia Martinez Library that has been funded. In the plaza is a light post dedicated to Lilia because she was the principal at Benavides Elementary School, and she retired in 1971. And also, I got super excited when you had shown the picture of the casa. I recognize that because where the picture was taken, immediately to the right, is Lupe and Lilia's house that was given to my mom, and it is now on permanent loan to the River Pierce Foundation. Speedy, yeah, I'm not quite sure if he lives in San Ignacio, but his ranch is literally borders Rancho La Union. Yes, he is. Yes, he and Lupe were our first cousins, I believe. So yes, very much in the family. I don't know. I just knew him as Speedy. Everybody knows him as Speedy. So okay. Yes, but you're right. Their ranch borders Rancho La Union. So, okay, so that was my little tidbit about San Ignacio, and now we are going to go into the ranch. When Lupe and Lilia passed, and my mother started to take over, and there were obviously some things that happened because we're from Dallas. My mother had ties to Laredo and San Ignacio, but we're up in the Dallas area, and so a lot of things had to be changed. Due to some circumstances and tick infestations and droughts, we no longer have cattle. We decided to turn it into a educational facility because education was so important. Obviously, to my aunt, education was so important. But Lupe was also educated. He, got his business degree in San Antonio, came back down to the ranch to continue doing his family dedications to Rancho La Union, and so we knew that they wanted education to be key when it came to this. So we are now an educational facility. We do have a wildlife exemption, and so we do a lot of things to help preserve wildlife. We've had several universities come to learn. They bring students, graduate students. We have found a glow-in-the-dark species of scorpions on the ranch. And so just kind of to give you a heads up of how things had segued throughout through the generations. And I think if you go ahead and, I've got the power here. Mhm.
I know that part of themselves, having been descendants of the land grants,
Yes.
is that we used to raise cattle,
Yes.
but the foundation continues to raise awareness.
Yes. We are. And actually, we did have cattle up until right before COVID. So, I mean, it's kind of brand new that we're not a fully functioning ranching facility. But again, we do a lot of things to help wildlife as well. So, I think, how do I segue here? Oh, forward here. Okay. I'm going to go ahead, and there's two videos that I want you to see. The first one, and it's all on YouTube, and I can send this out to anybody. The first one was produced in 2014, and it was produced by the Webb County Heritage Foundation, and it really does talk about the things that have been going on, and this was 10 years ago. The second one was actually something that I just shot really quick when I was in San Ygnacio back in April, because we are working with Texas A&M Kingsville to make sure that the jacales are being restored, but done correctly. We're still making sure that the historic aspects of the jacales are correct, and that's kind of one of our main focuses is. Yes. Well, the ranch house building, the bunkhouse, the kitchen, things like that. So you'll see some of this on these videos, and then again, I've got so much more that I would be more than happy to share with you all. I just wanted to make sure we didn't run out of time. So, how do I get this going? In any questions you have, I feel like there's so much to talk about, and I'm trying to stay focused.
So we as we transition on the setting, because Tony needs to change the setting, so that's going to take us about a minute or so. So Tony, okay, you let me know when. So as we buy a little bit of time, I want to say here that Dr. Alejo Salinas is here with us this morning. And so as we warm up for the next presentation on San Isidro, that Dr. Salinas has actually written 2 books. Ya será, será was one of them. Ya será ahora. And then the second one, ¿Qué será? And so a good amount of that is very autobiographical. And there's a third. And the third one is? It's in print. Okay. Okay, very good. And a lot of that is wrapped around the story of San Isidro. And so we'll hear about San Isidro. So Tony, are you good to go now? Okay, very good.
Well, okay, we can go ahead and. I don't see like a little. It's because it's already. Oh, somebody's cat. We've got audio. And we also have a 30-minute video that was done by Texas A&M Kingsville that was actually was submitted into several film festivals, was shown at Cannes down in the south of France. And so I started to create a YouTube page because of this. So everybody will get a chance to see that. I'll put it in the links on here.
My name is Jim Blusing. I'm an assistant professor at Texas A&M University in Kingsville, Texas. I teach in the Department of Civil and Architectural Engineering, where I'm also the director of the Institute of Architectural Engineering Heritage. We've been invited by the Guadalupe and Lilia Martinez Foundation and Bob and Shirley Gonzalez, the Rancho La Union, and their historic sites and treasures that they have here.
Most people don't understand about these old Spanish style ranches in this area is that the land was originally given to a specific person. In this case, it was the Whittier family. It was part of a portion system from the river back out to the east here several miles. And they were split up going down the river. This particular one, they later named it La Union Ranch because these ranches were different generations of the family members lived here. And then in the adjoining pieces were other family members, and they shared the water that was available, or water in this particular ranch, one of the areas where the water is available, because the water supply here is very limited. And back to the north and the east, there's an area over here known as La Coma, where the ground and the terrain has a lot of clay in it, it holds water. So you can see in the old maps, and if you know where to look out here, you can find the old fences where they had lanes, or as they're called in Spanish, callejones, where they would bring livestock through that area for water. Consequently, this being the headquarters of the O'Neill family during that era, they named the ranch La Union, which I thought was pretty well suited.
We're currently documenting the dam that was built in the mid-1800s. One of their goals is to restore it, and we're documenting the current conditions so that we can have something to work with and set up a restoration plan through our civil engineering program.
We have a obviously man-made rock wall. And you can tell how this man-made because the rocks are split or cut or sawed specifically for the purpose of building this wall. Now, it's somewhat of a mystery how, what, or why this thing is here. What you see here is only half of it. It keeps going all the way down here to the end. Whoever built it went to a lot of trouble to put little pieces of rock in there to make it solid, or try to keep it from leaking, or try to keep it held together. It's a different kind of rock than what you normally would find down here at the Rio Grande River. It's going to be very interesting to see what they figure out about this. I would like to see it rebuilt.
We were also working with the Jacalas, of which there are 12 in South Texas, and they're fortunate enough to have 2 of them here. We will be documenting those as historic structures.
A lot of the old buildings in this area used to be what some people refer to as Jacal or Jacales, with all the mesquite wood siding. And on the outside, there it's sealed with the mud and grass mixed together. And the reason for that was there was lots of mesquite around in those days. And it was very plentiful, not expensive, just the labor to cut it and split it. To me, the most interesting part of this building is this post right here. And that post that's right over there. The original posts, mesquite posts that were put in here to support the inside of this building.
The working corrals here that they have now are built out of mesquite wood, and they're still working, and we're going to document them as some of the longest still existing in the state of Texas.
What we have over here is pens that were built in the 1800s. They are functioning pens today. We use them a couple times a year to work cattle. Without my hat on, I'm 6'2". Okay, so this thing is right at 6 foot high. Give or take an inch. And it works very well.
Well, our students are a mixture of both civil engineering and ed students on this trip. We have had the good fortune of being partnered in our institute with the Department of Arts, Communications, and Theater, as well as with our partners in College Station, with the Texas Transportation Institute, and the Department of Landscape Architecture and Urban Planning, and the Center for Heritage Conservation. We've also got partners with the Texas Historical Commission and the National Park Service. And with all this group, we try and make sure that everyone has an opportunity to be a part of an educational experience. The Gonzaleses have made it very clear that part of our program is to help develop an educational facility here in the future for the kids in the community. And as in keeping with the spirit of that, every opportunity that we have here to work, we're trying to make it an educational experience for our students.
I graduated from J.W. Nixon High School back in 2005 as an entering freshman in LCC. I received a Guadalupe Martinez Foundation Scholarship that helped me continue on with my studies, and then on a transfer to a four-year institution. We're starting off by doing a surveying of this historical dam. We want to make sure that we have a precise sketch. So we started off by doing a survey, and we're collecting some points. So once we have that down, we can go ahead and put it into a computer-aided system that will give a precise sketch of the dam itself.
When we have an opportunity to work in communities around the state, we want to involve the local high school students and possibly even junior high students to get them aware and make them understand and give them an appreciation for their own local heritage. What our camera crews here are doing right now, we use large format photography because through large format photography, we can actually document the size, the shape, and the construction of different architectural and engineering examples. And what this works out for is if anything ever happens, such as this dam over the years since the 1800s, the roots have grown into the ground. It's an earthen dam and it's pushing out the stones. Well, we're documenting this so that we know what the condition is of the dam now and what the repair work will be required. The survey team, while we were out here, we found out that this isn't just one tank that's held, the water is held back by this dam, but it's actually a system of tanks to feed the livestock. And the survey team now is both documenting this dam and the spillways into this collection facility from the next collection facility higher upstream. And so any voices you hear right now, that's them on the other side of the hilltop working on the next water collection facility.
Standing in the middle of a lot of history, and the people that have been in here, it'd be amazing. There's no telling what kind of famous people have been through this kitchen.
So that's the first one. I'm gonna give you a little bit of review how we started 10 years ago. And then another video, it's about a minute and a half. I wasn't able to show, again, I was in over Ranch in April. And to give you a little bit of an idea of what Texas A&M Kingsville is doing, because now our focus is making sure that the roads are shifting. And so they're coming up with, and you'll see it, it's really cool, different ways and lasers of making sure they can measure if the hydraulics are shifting. And it's just like, again, it's a little explanation, but it's pretty exciting. And we've got, there's a lot, it's a lot of exciting things that we're doing. I'm learning a ton, so here we go.
Got that little guy, and so we can see here with that line and see if that building's going forward that way. If we totally independent, we're not connected. So this board is that way, we're going to connect right here. What's going to be in this periodically? Do it on this side. That way, right against the door, and we can get these without error, where that line is right there.
Interesting. And the other person you see is a graduate student from Texas A&M Kingsville. This was his project.
And I'm ready for you another one. You're late tonight. But the idea is also sort of measure. Let's say we have a plumber over here, right here. We're gonna turn this thing on. And if we have it, we have that laser there. And we're able to point. And get a distance there. 67.1.5 inches.
Oh, that's cool.
So that'll give us, we just need to find that consistent spot that we can be putting laser on. And then consistently shoot at that spot.
You can see the walls, the mesquite wood,
Oh, that's so
roof.
cool.
And
That's why I'm so excited to do this, y'all.
Kind of going. And the laser works a lot better when the dot like a little bit being not too bright. So we could do this on two actively.
Very cool. Okay. That is the fun part of the videos. And then, when I get back to the PowerPoint, there's just a couple of small. Oh, FYI, and I can put this link on here. This is the video. It's 24 minutes. It's another encompassing video that has been shown at film festivals and things like that. And that actually gets the whole history of what we've been talking about as well. So it's a really good overview.
I'm gonna interrupt you.
Sure.
I'm sorry,
No.
but this is an oral history. La tirada hunting season begins around what, November?
Mhm.
And in San Ignacio, in Los Ranchos, it would not officially open until the men gathered at El Rancho La Unión at Los Jacales.
Yes. Mhm.
And that's where they would have their carne asadas, they would slaughter their cabritos. And I venture to say that we slaughtered a few cases of beer as well.
Oh, 100%. I did come across like pictures of all my uncle's friends, you know, and their kill and these animals hanging upside down. Uh-oh, I messed up. A lot of singing, yes. And what was so interesting, again, this is more oral history, but it's a little bit interesting for me that I'm overseeing the ranch now because I guess because I was the youngest and female. My experiences at the ranch was nothing like what my brother's experiences were. And I just remember my uncle's birthday was in November over Thanksgiving. And so every Wednesday we would, you know, the Wednesday right before Thanksgiving, we would be in Laredo and he would have his mass at the house and this big birthday party. And then we would celebrate Thanksgiving and then his birthday party at the ranch where women were not allowed to go. But we had a great time. I had a great time with my mom, my grandmother, my aunt, and we would go around little communities. We would spend the day together going around little communities. And so I got to learn a different side of this part of of Texas just by getting in a car and having my great aunt had her station wagon and you know we would just enjoy those times and talk and things like that. So I'm not complaining by any stretch of the imagination. It's just those memories of the men singing and the parties and the beer and the and the hunting and things like that. And that's what my uncle wanted. He enjoyed it. He felt loved by it. He appreciated his friends. It was his home. He opened it up to everybody, and which is why it was so easy to form the foundation. So yeah, I could tell more stories about all of this, but again, I love this picture because it's the Jacales, and that was his mother, Lupe's mother, if I'm not mistaken, on that picture. And then, of course, the branding. So I was super excited to see that you had your branding. I was like, whoa, we're on the same page. This over here, this picture right here is what our current ranch manager is doing, Jim Fulgham. He is so proud of this because he makes sure that all the animals have water. So even though we don't have any cattle, if there's a creature who would need to go to the big water tank, it's there. But then that little one is for the snakes and for the little squirrels and things like that. Uh-huh. I'll have to ask about that or keep an eye out for it. I've got, I'll have to keep an eye out for that. I've probably seen it a million times.
What we'll move you on was
also a rest station for the stagecoach.
Yes, it was. Very good point.
Come in from at the San Ignacio on the way to Corpus.
To Corpus. Mhm.
That was a rest station there at Rancho Union for the people that were on the stage.
On the stagecoach, exactly. And that is a very good write-up that we actually have on our website as well. And the Surrey, the original Surrey that was on the ranch, is now on permanent loan at the Zapata County Museum. So I'll be there next weekend. So yes.
Well, there's a man that comes to the saloon, as Joanne Woodward is hoodwinking all the poker players at the table, and he says, all ready for points toward, and he mentioned San Ignacio in the movie. And then we're going to Escobas.
Yeah. Another thing that, again, talking about pairing the cactus, whoever knew my uncle knew he had only half a finger because he lost it from about here down from pairing a cactus. And so this is one thing I love about this picture is because there's the cactus, but on the very back you see are the windmills that we did start negotiations right before COVID, and that we do have, oh, it's killing me, how many, it escaped my brain, but we do have several windmills now, as well as so do the other ranch owners in the area. You'll start to see a little bit more of those, but you know, I feel like we just blew a hole in the time continuum with talking about this history. But again, just making sure that my great aunt and great uncle and now my mom, were, you know, that we honored their love for education, for their values, the history, their sense of community, I think is just the best way to put it. And that's what they loved. And Diana, were you telling me that you remember seeing my mom at the ranch when y'all were the same, or maybe around the same age? Tweety, yes, everybody knew my mom, Tweety. So,
Okay. Okay.
Tell a story.
Okay. Me?
I wasn't there.
Growing up, we would go to Rancho La Union for our Easter picnics, and all the family gathered there. Not only did we enjoy the carne asada and the camaraderie of family, but also the Easter egg hunt and the softball games. And there was one, my mother loved it. She was out there first, you know, before anybody else, but so was your mom.
Yes.
Of course, your mom is a lot younger than my mom. But yes, I remember Anna's beautiful mom, Shirley.
Yeah, and there she is, and it's funny because when you were telling us your story, when we were having our original conversation about this, and you had said that story, and I'm as soon as you know we got off the phone, I started looking through pictures, and I came across that the middle one, and I was like, oh my gosh, that was just so reminded me of what you had just said. So I put that in there, and they were so good to my mom, and she was good to them in return. So just the way it works. So I think that might be it for me. Oh, yep, that is. That's not me. Thank you. Do you have any questions? Oh, let me think. What I'll do is on the Facebook page, you know, that talking about this with the Zoom link in the comments, I will put the links to everything here and our website because there's a lot of history, like you were talking about the resting point and things like that. There's some history there on our website as well, and we'll just go from there. Lots of pictures. You had to ask me that. I want to say 2,500. I'll have that a definitive answer. And we are on both sides of the highway, FYI. And yes, and then the cattle would go underneath, and just hearing the stories is fascinating. Hearing about how when they had to get checked for ticks, what would happen if there was a tick? What would happen? Separating baby from mama and the baby freaking out for about 20 minutes until they got reunited. Things like that is just, it's unreal what the, it is over 2,000. Okay, so I was right. All right, is there anything else? I mean, I'm always here for questions, so, and I love this. So. Yes.
You meant like wind turbines.
Yes, I call them windmills, but the wind turbines.
What is the local water
situation, for example, groundwater.
Mhm.
We traditionally associate windmill with a water pumping mechanism.
Exactly.
Do you have any water wells?
We are working on that, and it's kind of an interesting situation that I do not. I'm afraid to talk because I don't know enough about it, because that's a project my dad is actually taking care of and explaining to me at the same time. But I do know that it's a water rights selling issue and things like that that I'm not as familiar with. But I will get your contact information, and I will find out the answer. Again, it's just something sometimes we're still having to, as things shift, we're learning at the same time. So, oh, yes.
Your first question was about water wells, and just so that people, because we have a lot of people on the internet, so that people can hear you.
Yes, so the term windmill came up, right? We saw a wind turbine. But in ranching communities, we generally refer to windmills as a water pumping device for groundwater. And I'm assuming that based on the water capture dam and so forth that you showed us, that the ranching community in the past in that region basically relied on water capture of rainwater for ponds and water for livestock versus, for example, in the San Isidro area, where the groundwater is very shallow, and we can access groundwater at 20 feet, below the surface. And I'm assuming that groundwater is not as accessible in the part of San Ignacio. Of course, you have the river nearby, but then as the ranches extend away from the river, water accessibility is probably more challenged than in other places.
We do still have one tank called La Goma, and it does have water in it. But again, we are researching, I guess, the next steps ahead as far as buying water, leasing water, things like that. And that's again another part of the aspect of the ranch that it was done differently in the past, and then as things are shifting, that we're having to adapt with that. And so we're kind of in a little situation where, but we are working. Again, my dad's taking the lead on that project and is working with the state in but like in that area, yes, but not on our ranch. Okay, yeah. So I might have to get y'all's phone number and get to know that.
So the observation from Carlos Martinez is that there's a few water wells that are about 300 feet deep, is what you mentioned, just so that people can know. So what we'd like to do here, and there's a lot of curiosities here, and so if you have those curiosities, by all means, engage Ana and engage anybody else here, because there's a lot of wisdom in the room. Clearly, we'd like to call for a little break because people have been sitting for a while. And so if we can take about a 10-minute break, we'll monitor that as best as we can. And so for the people who are online, if you want to interact, for the folks who are online, just send us some questions or send us some observations. We have folks who are monitoring that, and we'll see if we can respond to that when we come back. So let's go on about a 10-minute break, más o menos. Bathrooms, if you go up the little incline there and then to the right, there's bathrooms out there, the public bathrooms. And if you want to just peruse some of the galleries in the interim, go ahead and do that as well. All right, so 10 minutes. I'm timing it. And then, Mr. Martinez, you'll be on. All right.
Or feel free to.
Yes.
And if I don't know the answer, it gives me a chance to learn it.
Never take risks like that again. Never take risks.
in with his signature. If you see a Stetson tall in a crowd, you know it's Mercurio Martinez.
Thank you.
That's a cowboy for you. And by the way, what came first, the vaquero or the cowboy? Absolutely. Vienen desde España through Mexico. Yes, ma'am.
And we have a project going that we're almost
Just remember, if you say something, cannot hear you. Yes.
I just want to say that Jim Hall County is the vaquero capital of Texas. And right now we have a project to where we're going to have Armando Hinojosa from Laredo, the artist sculptor. He is making a life-size bronze monument of a vaquero with his horse. And it's an ongoing project that we have, and that we're very, very proud of that.
Yes, there is one in Austin. Yes, thank you so much. I know that some people might argue with you about the vaquero, but it has been recognized, and you are the vaqueros, your football team, correct? In San Diego. Oh, okay, well, Longhorns. Yeah, we're right there. In Hebbronville, I know. You all used to send a little postcard, and there was always a cowboy joke on it. And you had the information on the sale for the month. Yes, I remember. Daddy used to get it. Before I introduce my cousin Mercurio, I'm just going to talk a little bit about my first experience with a vaquero. Not a cowboy, a vaquero. When my daddy rounded up, you know that as years went by, the horse became obsolete and they started using trucks. And in some big ranches, they even use helicopters. But daddy still used horses. And he had an older gentleman by the name of Antonio Lerma. Antonio Lerma was a short, bow-legged vaquero. And I loved to watch him on the horse. He would get on that horse and he would maneuver that horse, gathering those cattle with his thighs because his hands were busy with a lariat, roping the cow, tumbling it down, wrapping it up, and then it would get branded. That was the very first vaquero that I ever saw, my daddy's cowboy. And we're going to introduce this cowboy right here. About Mercurio, the list is long. Mercurio was born in Laredo, Texas in 1937. He grew up in the city's Azteca neighborhood. Laredo was very proud of the neighborhoods. La Azteca, 3 Points, yes, there were several. El Cuatro, yes. He studied at St. Augustine High School and he earned his bachelor's degree from St. Mary's University in San Antonio, and then went to the University of North Texas in Denton for his master's in business administration. His postgraduate work includes studies at Southern Methodist University, Colorado State University, and the Harvard University School of Business. On August 25th, 1959, Mercurio married the former Rosa Ancira, and I believe she's out there. Yes. Hi, Rosita. Thank you for coming. The couple are the proud parents of 6 children: Leticia, Adriana, Mercurio III, Jorge, Carlos, who is out in the audience, and we know him as Charlie, and Rosalicia, all of whom have maintained a strong commitment to Laredo, following in their father's footsteps. This one is a little harder for me to read, but this is, did somebody say something? No? Okay. But it's up there and it tells you about his education. It tells you about his paper presentations and his professional employment and experience. And that is very extensive. I am going to share with you the elected offices held. He is a present member of the Board of Trustees at Laredo Community College. He is appointed member of the Webb County Railroad District. It's a 5-member board. He is a former president of the Board of Trustees of the Laredo Independent School District and the Laredo Junior College Board of Trustees, a former councilman of the city of Laredo. How long were you county judge, Mercurio?
12 years. 12 years.
He must have been doing something right in Webb County. They kept him around for 12 years, and that is kind of a record. And Mercurio has not really retired from the public field. He's still out there working with the community, helping out, and he is very passionate and dedicated toward education. Having said all that, I am happy to introduce Mercurio, who is going to talk to us about his ranch.
Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me. Before anything, let me also bring up a little point about el Fuerte de San Ignacio. And as already been acknowledged, we have this young lady actually showed the arrow pointing, okay, directly to the North Star. And that came about, the reason why, if I may bring up, there were, at the time, there were two brothers, young kids, that were, because that fort tiene troneras, all right? And that's where they would defend against the attacks of the Indians. Well, it just so happened that on one of those occasions, two of the young kids were actually kidnapped and taken by the Indians back to where they came from. Okay, now this was a story that was given to me by my father. And according to my dad, they were primos hermanos. They were first cousins of my father. Be as it may, according to my father's comments, that the Indian, on the way back to their camp at night, he would use those two little boys to actually, pulgarlos de los pies, de los piojos, los piojos, perdón. Anyway, so they continued on until they came to an area that they were going to cross, which was a desert. And according to the remark of my father, that the Indian told the two boys, he says, agua, mucho, lejos, nada, all right? And of course, they started crossing. That night, of course, the Indian was still very, very tired, supposedly, but he still used those two boys to, to take off the little piojos, from him. He ended up actually falling, to a very, very deep sleep. And that actually made them available to start getting themselves loosened from the, from the Indian. And that's when they started going back, okay? And they used the North Star, okay? And that's the reason for it. So on the way back, they could only go walk back at night and using the North Star as their guide. And they finally ended up upriver at the Rio Grande, all right, muy malnutridos, as a remark that my father still told me about it. And fortunately, the family in that ranch, all right, they ended up sending message to the family in San Ignacio, all right, that two sons had escaped from the Indians and that they were going to be looking after them until they would be in a position that they would actually be brought back to their home in San Ignacio, which is exactly what happened. And then one of those sons, or the older one, was the one that ended up actually he ended up looking for the right stones, which he carved, lo labró, all right, in such a way that he was able to install that particular arrow pointing directly to the North Star, and it's already been commented by the prima. It's so accurate that it's only six minutes off from what you said, correct? All right. So anyway, and to this day, it's still used. According to my father, who came back, he at one time he taught in old San Ignacio. My father would actually send one of the students over to go and check that sundial, and then based on that sundial, that's where my father would actually correct his watch. Okay, so it's that's a little bit of that background, that story there. Okay, but anyway, coming back again, I want to thank all of you for being here, and at the same time, thank you for the invitation. I guess we will start out here. This is the El Rancho La Selva and also Casa Verde. Actually, my father first started, he bought the tract of land, which was La Selva. And the reason why the term selva came about is because my father ended up actually hiring three families to be as sharecroppers, okay? And those sharecroppers started to clear the land, okay, in order to start farming. And according to, I mean, there was so much thick brush that one of those ranch hands parece una selva aquí, all right? It was complaining. So de ahí agarró el nombre del rancho, and ever since, of course, that's the name of that ranch, Rancho La Selva. Anyway, those three families that were actually, in a manner of speaking, working with my father there at the ranch, were medieros, and you probably are aware of the term mediero. Okay, they are the ones. My father would provide all of the farm implement, the land, obviously. Okay, the farm implements to clear the land. Okay, and they would do the labor. All right, with my father providing not only the land but the mules and also the equipment to do all of that work, while the medieros would actually do the labor. And then once the product would be sold, whatever it was raised, de ahí iban a medias, all right? So that's where the term mediero comes about, okay? The labor people, the people that provided the labor, that ended up getting half of whatever it was that was sold on that product. Okay, so that's where the term mediero comes about. So anyway, if you will see out here, my father was highly respected. He actually he ended up graduating from St. Edward's in 1898. All right. And he, at the beginning, when my father first started talking about it to his father, whose my grandfather's name was Proceso, his remark to my father was, el interés tuyo es estar aquí supervisando los ranchos, los terrenos. No, papá. El interés mío es principalmente educarme y luego venir aquí a ayudar aquí a nuestra comunidad. Por fin lo convenció. And my grandfather, Proceso, ended up buying a mule, which my father then used to go from San Ignacio to St. Edward's, all right, and took him 3 weeks, all right? Would you believe that? It's hard to even think that way. ¿Cómo le hizo? We don't know, but you have to give them or him a lot of credit. And because it took him that long to get over there to St. Edward's, He only came once during the time that he was there at St. Edwards, all right, because it was 3 weeks, going up and then 3 weeks going down. So a total of 6 weeks. That was too much, all right. Be that as it may. So anyway, because he was one of probably the only one that had a formal education, all right, he was frequently being used as an interpreter. I already mentioned to you, of course, he graduated from St. Edwards in 1898, but he started teaching in Old Dolores settlement, right? And then from there, he went over to teach in San Ignacio. And then from San Ignacio, he ended up going to Old Zapata, all right? And while there in Old Zapata, he decided he was the principal of the school there. And in 1910, he decided to also run for county treasurer, which he was very fortunate enough that he did get elected. And when he took office, in 1910, he noticed that the county treasurer at that time did not keep absolutely any records, none whatsoever. All right. So my father opened up a set of books, which we still own. All right. And those set of books are at the ranch, in Rancho La Selva, which eventually I intend to donate to the university. But be that as it may, because he was one of probably the only one that had the kind of education that he had, he also was frequently used to be the interpreter on legal matters, on legal cases there in Old Zapata. So they frequently would call upon my father to be the interpreter, and he was so good at it that an article in Spanish, he would read it as if it were in English. I mean, as a young kid, I would say, "Papá, pero cómo?" But and then the articles in Spanish, he would read it as if it were in English. That's how good he was at it. And during that period of time, the law firm that was highly recognized all over South Texas was the law firm that was in Laredo known as Hicks, Dixon, and Bobbitt. They were so impressed with my father that they offered him a job to be not only the interpreter, but also be the overall general manager of that particular law firm, which he accepted. So that's what he did in 1927 when he moved over from Old Zapata over to Laredo. And so he actually and during that period of time, of course, because my father was so good, I think it's me. All right. Be that as it may, my father was frequently called upon. Also, he loved to do a tremendous amount of research on land titles. As you probably, most of you are aware of it. When it comes to land titles, it was the people, from the King of Spain Thank you. It was all over the place. I hope not. Anyway, the King of Spain was one that sent in, okay, land surveyors. And estos agrimensores en el condado de Zapata y el condado de Webb, que es Laredo, okay, fueron las personas que actually fueron los que dividieron los terrenos para otorgar, para dar a las diferentes familias que vinieron a desarrollar esa parte. Y en ese entonces, los medieros pues, no tenían, realmente no había cercas. Entonces lo que usaban eran las piedras, peñascos grandes de sandstone, que le nombraban en, what's the term again? Perdón. All right. Mocorrones. No, be that as it may. My father is actually, I have a picture where he's pointing at those sandstones, okay? And anyway, yes, ma'am. Mollejones o mollejones. Okay. Mollejones. Thank you very much, and I appreciate that. Mollejones, okay? So that is the proper term. And my father was actually frequently called upon, all right? And as a matter of fact, at my ranch, I have a picture of my father pointing at one of those big stones because that was actually what was the division between one landowner and the other, okay? And especially in the 1920s, 30s, and all the way up to the 1940s, there was a lot of challenges on land ownership. And frequently, my dad would be actually summoned, all right, because he was known as an authority and also incredibly, believe it or not, very, very honest. And whatever it is that he would testify, believe it or not, both parties would accept his testimony. That's the way he was. And because of that, all right, there's of course, he loved to do all of that. He was very, very good at it. And during the time that the Falcon Dam was built, okay, the government had big, big problems as to the ownership of land. And my dad by then was in his late 60s and 70s. So the federal government, International Boundary and Water Commission, made an exception and hired him to help out the government to actually find out who were really the legal owners of the different tracts of land that were going to be condemned, all right? So he worked for a number of years actually doing what he always loved, all right? So he had quite a bit of research. He had so much documentation that let me show you a little bit of that, if I may. When my dad passed away, there was quite a bit of documentation. And fortunately, this was in the 1950s. And it was the time that I had a good relationship with the people from A&M because they actually provided quite a bit of, well, actually, they would come down to hunt at La Selva and another tract of land which is known as La Trinidad. Be that as it may, they are the ones that actually suggested, they said, we are aware about your father and the documentation that he had. May we suggest that you actually allow us to go and take all of those documents and have it preserved at the library at College Station. And of course, naturally, I went ahead and gave them that authority, so to speak. So for better than, I would say 40, 50 years, that was where all of those documents were actually kept up to just last month, last 2 months actually, to be specific, because I was very fortunate enough that I had a very strong friendship with the chancellor, John Sharp. All right, and before he retired, I asked John if he would be nice enough to give the order and transfer all those documents to TAMIU, Texas A&M International University, which is Laredo. All right, and he actually ordered the librarian over at College Station, and the librarian didn't like it, but she had no choice. She was ordered by the chancellor because he was the big boss of all the universities of A&M. And that's exactly what happened. They transferred, and now they are, and this is a copy, all right, of all of those documents, believe it or not, okay? Quite a bit. Of course, there's also some personal things because my father was incredibly meticulous about everything, okay? Even if he would spend a nickel, he would write it down. that was him, okay? But he was highly recognized and respected because he was an authority on land titles. He was frequently called, and that's the reason why the International Boundary and Water Commission ended up making an exception, because in spite of the fact that he was already in his late 60s and early 70s, all right, but they needed to have somebody, all right, that would actually help them to determine and who, frankly, were the legal owners of the different tracts of land that were being condemned due to the construction of Lake Falcon. And that's exactly what happened. And it's unfortunate that Falcon Dam now is so low. But at one time, all right, it actually flooded all of that area, including Old Guerrero, where my mother was born. If you will recall, the old church in Old Guerrero actually was underwater for quite some time, all right? But anyway, that's a little bit of background about the history about my father and the manner in which he was highly respected. But if there's any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer. Yes, sir.
So I want to expound upon this. So this is the inventory of Mercurio Martinez, the
Archives.
papers of the archives.
That is-
So this is what you would call in the museum business basically the finding aid. And so you can find, if you're looking to research Mercurio Martinez or anything related to that, such as the land titles around Falcon, land titles and those kinds of things. So this is actually very valuable. And as a museum executive, I can completely appreciate the angst that the Texas A&M University College Station archivists would have had, because you don't do that. You don't move an archive from here to another place without the governing board saying you can move it. In this particular case, the chancellor told the governing board, told the archivist that they need to move the papers from College Station to TAMIU,
TAMIU,
which
that's
is actually quite momentous. That's a rare occasion. So did you have your hand up, sir?
Yes, thank you. The Kingdom of Zapata, actually, he was the main author, even though somebody else ended up taking actually the first. But the main author of the Kingdom of Zapata was my father, all right, which of course I ended up donating the rights to the county of Zapata, all right, years later, all right, after my dad had passed away. But that is very much so. And by the way, there's also a similar history of Zapata that is known as the Judge Bravo. All right, he was a border boss. Okay, so there are two books that actually address the history of Zapata County. One of them was The Kingdom of Zapata, which was co-authored by my father. And then, of course, this one, the background on Judge Bravo when he was the county judge at that time. But anyway, that's a little bit of back. This.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martinez. There's another question. Yes, Ana. Here, you come up.
I have a comment and a question. My mom also has a book about San Ignacio. She wrote it as her thesis, and they said this is too important, write it as a book. So, yes, and so we've got two copies left, and so I'm pushing to also go ahead and have it republished. So give me a few months on that one, and then I'll be, more than happy to send it here. I honestly, it was just her paper, that they said. So I'll go ahead and get that to you all. But I do have a question, and I'm sorry if I missed it. I had a phone call. My dad called me. Can you explain to me really fast, Old Guerrero versus Revilla? Is that the same, or it is? Okay, because my grandmother was from there, and I remember when I was 14, I would come spend some summers with my grandparents, and they showed it to me, and sitting here and watching her, I'm 14 years old, in the car, bawling, remembering that time and things like that. I didn't realize the two names were interchangeable. I just wanted to ask that question really fast.
To talk about an experience with Old Guerrero, and I was still a teenager when I went with my mother, because my mother was born there. And I still remember all of the streets were actually paved with sandstone, okay? Every one of those streets in Old Guerrero. And I still remember as we were being driven out, we would have, which in part, really impressed me a lot. The ladies that would be with, making tortilla de harina, would go out there and sneak out from the window with the hand of the other one with the tortilla being held, so that they would not take the tortilla out, but at the same time they would always try to, being a small town, and they would always try to find out, pues, quién viene, quién es, and all of that. But be that as it may, that actually made an impact on me as a young teenager. But anyway, I still remember that with the ladies that actually would end up actually, not only amasando, but actually, getting the tortillas actually being being done. All right, be that as it may. But anyway, that's a little bit of history there. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. That last slide that you saw, that's his ranch house. Doesn't look at all like a jacal, does it? Lolly, my daughter Laura, and I went out there to visit with him and his family. And let me tell you, roughing it at the ranch takes on a whole new meaning. You have a lovely home. Thank you so much for accepting to be a part of this, Mercurio. Thank you. Our next speaker is Héctor Rolando Uribe. And I'm going to read something, Héctor, because as much as I like history, I like the romance of history even more. And your tia Ninfa wrote this book, and the baby brother was your dad. So give me a minute. I believe it was Blas Maria II. And this is what she wrote, the third. Blas Maria III was Hector's dad. And this is what she wrote in introduction to the last chapter of her book, and it's entitled Blas Maria. My mother, these are Tia Ninfa's words. My mother, whom I have portrayed as being distant and undemonstrative when we were growing up, seems to have saved all her affection and tenderness to lavish on her last child, Blas Maria. His pleasant, clear voice breaking with emotion, my baby brother speaks with the assurance of one swearing on the Bible. Mother loved me better than she did any of the other children in the family. As far back as I can remember, I have known it. Furthermore, I have been loved in a very special way by my 11 brothers and sisters. Looking back on the 76 years of my life, I find that never was I denied anything I asked for never once was I hurt by any of my siblings in any manner whatsoever. This is his big sister writing about her baby brother. And most of the chapters are like that. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Héctor Rolando Uribe. He was born on January 17th, 1946. He is an American lawyer. He is a former Democratic member of the Texas Senate and the Texas House of Representatives. He was the Democratic Party nominee for the Texas Line Commissioner in 2010, but was defeated in the election by Jerry E. Patterson. He is also an actor listed as Roland Uribe, having been in more than 10 movies, including the award-winning No Country for Old Men. He attended high school in Miami, Florida, and graduated from Christopher Columbus Marist High School. He attended the University of Madrid in the summer of 1966. He graduated from the University of Miami with a Bachelor of Arts in 1967 and later a Juris Doctor in 1970. He has a very extensive legislative and political career. He served in the House of Representatives from 1978 to 1981 and the Texas Senate from 1981 to 1991. He is especially proud of being recognized as a lector at the University of Texas. He is a direct descendant of Don Blas Maria Uribe, who is credited for expanding the Fort Trevino Uribe ranch in San Ygnacio. In the second half of President Trump's presidency, a proposed wall would have cut off these structures. Like I mentioned before, by the 1870s, there were 10 structures in San Ygnacio. One was a church, one was a pharmacy, there were 2 mercantiles, and the rest were residences. The wall would have cut through these very historic, very old homes. Some date back 200 years, and they're still standing and in use. Héctor also taught at the University of Texas. He was a guest lecturer for 3 years at the Center for Mexican American Studies and taught 2 courses, Mexican American Legal History and Mexican Americans in the Texas Legislature. I asked Héctor to talk about the land and the porciones. And when he told me he was going to talk about 2 legal cases, I was very, very excited because this is history and this is our story. And you won't find this in the Texas history book in your classrooms. That's why we are here, to tell our stories. So with that, my cousin Hector Uribe.
Thank you, Prima. Is this on? I have a very soft voice, but I really don't like to stand behind a podium, although I'm going to have to do it today. Let me say that it's an honor to be here and to talk about what's really, really boring, the law. It's like watching a block of ice when you read an opinion melt in the sun. It's drip, drip, drip. If you've ever gone to a trial, you probably have walked out. If you read a legal opinion, you want to give up right away. Now, given that context, what I really would like to do at the very beginning is paint a scenario politically and legally about what was happening at that particular time around 1892. Before I start, let me ask you, has anyone ever seen the original land grant from the Count of Escandon, representing the Spanish king, to Don Jose Vasquez Borrego? Has anyone ever seen it? No, you haven't. Why not? It's probably one of the most important historical documents that anyone can possibly have, especially if they are claiming ownership through that grant in any way. Where are they? So let me paint this scenario. And by the way, I really like that picture that you had up there. Cameraman, is there any way that you can use A1 to put that picture on me now? All right, let me paint this scenario. It's 1892. And I'm painting this scenario to give you a sense of history. 1892. Leo the 13th is the Pope in Rome. Queen Victoria is still the reigning monarch over all of Britannia. That includes the colonies. Closer to home, it's the Gilded Age, known for its steel barons and its timber barons and its mineral barons and its railroad barons. 1892. Because the railroads are the steam engine of economic development. Where the railroads go, communities generally thrive. In the United States, closer to home, Grover Cleveland had just defeated, will defeat Benjamin Harrison in November. And he will become the first president to be restored to office, a second, to finish a second term. But even closer, in 1892, Porfirio Diaz still reigned in Mexico. We all know who Porfirio Diaz is. And this was, amazingly, by winning an election with 99% of the vote. Amazing, isn't it? Well, maybe not. So despite Porfirio Diaz's apparent popularity, a fellow by the name of Catarino Erasmo Garza launched a revolution. The revolutionaries were based in the two states, the state of Coahuila and the state of Texas. So what happened? And why is that important? The war began on the night of September 15, 1891, when 80 to 60 Garcistas, as they were called, crossed the Rio Grande to overthrow the Mexican government. One of the first battles was fought along the banks of the Rio Grande at San Ygnacio on December 26. Merry Christmas, Mexico. But this was in 1891. A large force of rebels from the state of Texas shot from the American side on the banks of at the soldiers that were encamped on the Mexican side. And it's at this particular time, this turbulent time, that the owners of the porciones were called upon to establish that they had a right to live on their property, to cultivate their property, and to just enjoy possession of their property. Why? Today, if you want to establish your right to property, what do you do? You show your deed, right? So what if you don't have, if you're an heir of Borrego, if you don't have the land grant? We're going to study this because that's exactly what's about to happen. I've got to read from my notes because this is technical stuff that's coming up. What does a litigant do when the evidence of 150 years of history is located in a foreign jurisdiction? What happens if it's been destroyed? Remember, the county of Zapata had not been organized by the Texas legislature until 1858, meaning that over 100 years, almost 100 years of history was located somewhere else. In fact, the fundamental question of the Texas River boundary with Mexico and whether the land was even in the United States wasn't decided until 1848, after the conclusion of the Mexican-American War and with the signing of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. And that established the Rio Grande and the Gila rivers as the international boundary between the United States and Mexico. Now let's look back to 1821. Because in 1821, this part of Texas was part of New Spain. Secondly, those lands that had been in the possession of New Spain became the lands of the Republic of Mexico and then the Republic of Texas in 1836, and then lands of the state of Texas. Those Spanish lands, those were Spanish lands that belonged to the king. Those lands that had not been given away. Those lands were called in Texas Texas public lands. And those Texas public lands were in that day and now still managed by the commissioner of the Texas Land Office. And the office is headed by the commissioner, and it's part of the executive department. It's in, I think, Article 4 of the Texas Constitution. The Texas Land Commissioner is part of the executive department. And along with the governor, the lieutenant governor, the attorney general, and the comptroller of public accounts. So just like the governor and all of those other statewide officials, he has to run for statewide office. And as powerful as the commissioner of the General Land Office is, he is constitutionally prohibited from giving away property that is already titled or owned equitably. In 1892, W.L. McGahey was the commissioner of the Texas General Land Office. And now we're going to go on to the even more boring stuff. That was just giving you an historic scenario. It's Texas Mexican Railway Company versus Uribe. And here on mine, it's et al. Does anybody know what et al means? And others. Because it wasn't just Blas Uribe that was having to go to court here. It was a lot of other people. These were the heirs and assigns and the successors of the original land grantees. Now, because we don't have a copy today, because the research hasn't been done, we don't have a copy of the petition. We don't have a copy of the answers. We don't have a copy of any of the motions. We don't have any copy of the rulings or decisions of the court because we don't have a total transcript or record of that trial. But we have to look at this case to summarize what happened in the trial court. The plaintiff, the Texas Mexican Railway Company, a corporation, filed lawsuit against Blas Uribe and all of the other ranchers, and they claimed that they had applied for public lands. Remember those Spanish lands that hadn't been donated? Okay, that's what we're talking about. And that the General Land Office had located those lands, surveyed those lands, and issued certificates allowing the railroad company to lay claim to it. The plaintiff claim title for 62 sections of 640 acres, 39,640 acres in Zapata County. Now, looking back at the sometimes rocky history for Tejanos in Texas, you have to ask a question. Was this a test case? Was it an attempt to create a legal precedent and a process that could conceivably undermine the rights of ownership and the claims of all the Borrego grant porciones? 350,000 acres. Why was the state of Texas giving away the land of Tejanos that they had owned for 150 years? As I said, trials are boring. But if you're a student of trials, the trial of a contested case is like live theater in slow motion, but it's alive. It's like a boxing match when you have two good lawyers. One lawyer throws a punch, and then another lawyer throws a punch, a counter punch. The judge is the referee. And he's a referee like a judge would judge. That's a low blow. That's a bad blow. Not fair. Um, in a boxing match, the judges sit at ringside. The referee is not the judge. And this case was tried not before a jury. I'm sorry, that's right. It was not tried before a jury. It was tried to the judge, a judge by the name of J.C. Russell. In Texas, the jury is the finder of fact. The judge finds and applies the law. When a case is tried before a judge without a jury, the judge becomes the finder of fact and applies the law as well, and scores the fight and determines who the winner is. Everything is riding on that judge. Most trials start with an opening arguments, and from both sides, and both will argue how the case came about factually, and presumably the plaintiff railroad company argued, we're claiming title through certificates from the state and anticipation of what I think they suspected that the defendants were going to argue. If there is an argument that grants exist, they're imperfect. They weren't completed, and therefore not valid. And so, okay. The defendants, I'm sure, argued, wait a moment. We've been here for 150 years. We're claiming rights through the heirs of the Borregos. The land was given by the King of Spain through Count Escandon to the Borregos. That's how we're claiming. We've inherited from him, or we've bought property from him, or his heirs. Everybody knows it. It's history. It's not a secret. Then the plaintiff countered, probably, maybe you did, but maybe not. What proof? Proof. What documents? Papers do you have that the King of Spain gave these specific powers to give away this specific land? What proof that you have lived on this property continuously? Didn't you run off when the Indians came? Remember the fort, Trevino Uribe Fort? The Indians did come. Show me your proof. Show me your papers. Mexican. Now, I don't think they actually said that. Okay. I think, but maybe they thought it. I mean, it's hard to look at our Tejano history without noting that only of late has the media start calling us Tejanos, recognizing us as Tejanos and not Mexicanos. I wonder why. Implicit in the term Tejanos is a recognition that we are citizens of the United States of America and not foreigners, that we didn't come to this country came to us and absorbed us. Proof. You ask for proof. Since we don't have a transcript of the proceedings, they probably scoffed. I have to assume that they argued something like this. We've been living here for 150 years. Whatever documents exist are in Mexico, probably in the state of Coahuila, in Saltillo, which I think was the capital at the time. But we're living proof of history, which we will not let you erase. These lands have been continuously occupied by us. And there is other circumstantial evidence, if we cannot prove the original documents existed, that proves that the governments of Spain and Mexico operated as if they did. Circumstantial evidence. So all right, so, and let me tell you why we had this dilemma. Apparently, the Borregos had lost their original documents in 1828. Did you know that? Justice Gaines, in this appellate opinion, reports that Tejanos offered their circumstantial evidence, but curiously, only part of the record of the general visit. Do you know what the general visit is? Las visitas that were made in 1767 in Laredo. And that evidence had evidence that the Borregos had been actually on their land, completed the transaction, the grant. So what were Judge Russell's decisions here? The land had never actually been surveyed. Surprise? That they were mere office surveys. That they were made out by a surveyor without going on the land, and I quote, without going upon the land and running the lines and marking the corners as required by law. Second, the judge found that an imperfect grant of the land in controversy had been made about the year 1757 by the King of Spain to Borrego, but which had been recognized by the state of Tamaulipas in 1829, and that Borrego, his assigns, heirs, had been in continuous possession of the land for 150 years, and ever since the inception of the claim, asserting title under the claim. So what did Judge Russell decide? What was the ultimate conclusion in the case? That because there was no actual survey, that the plaintiff could not maintain a lawsuit at all. And then that because these lands had been in continuous possession, that this case came within, or these lands came within the purview of the land described as those that were already titled and equitably owned and not available for the state of Texas through their Texas commissioner to give away. So, Blas Uribe, the first, my great-great-grandfather, wins, and so do all of the other ranchers that own collectively over 39,000 acres. And now we go on to the appeal because the plaintiff says, I don't like the decision. This is the state of Texas, the great state of Texas, and I want the Texas Supreme Court to decide this issue. What's riding on it? If Blas Uribe loses, the question of the validity of the Borrego land grants becomes a legal precedent that can be used against the other owners of the 350,000 acres. So how did the Supreme Court decide? And how did it reason to get to the judgment? An opinion is a recap by a justice of everything that's transpired in the case below, and whether the mistakes made by the judge warrant a reversal or by the judge. There's a lot that you can miss by reading a legal opinion. There's another case that I think needs to be pointed out in determining how the validity of the Spanish land grants was established. Von Rosenberg versus Haynes. I wonder if that's any relationship to Jorge Haynes, Primo. Do you know? Okay, now listen to this. Listen to the somersaults that are about to be taken. Literal illegal somersaults. The Haynes case had been decided earlier that very same day that the Supreme Court was trying to decide the Uribe case. Do you think that's a coincidence? If you think so, I have a bridge to sell you. The Haynes case had actually been filed and tried and decided after the case filed against Uribe. And here it is, coming in front and being decided before the Uribe case. The Haynes case was a lawsuit against the Webb County clerk, L. Haynes, who had refused to honor the plaintiff's efforts to file the certificates of the state because the lands in question were, in his opinion, and he was a public official, already titled or equitably owned. The Haynes case raised almost exactly the same issues as the Uribe case. Did a grant exist? Was it perfect or imperfect? Judge Gaines writes in the Uribe opinion, in quotation marks, the Uribe case is almost identical with the case of von Rosenberg versus Haynes. This day,
decided in this court. In that case, the appellant filed certificates upon a part of the land claimed by defendants herein as a Borrego grant, and sought by a writ of mandamus to compel the surveyor to make surveys in pursuance of the locations. Many, if not all, of the defendants in this suit went too fast. Many, if not all, including Uribe, of the defendants in this suit were made defendants in that. There's something going on here. With one or two exceptions. What were the exceptions? Well, they related to the general visits, las visitas. Except that in Rosenberg, in von Rosenberg versus Haynes, which was tried at a term subsequent, which means a year, to that which the present case was determined, the judge held that the evidence showed that the grants to Borrego were perfect grants. Who was the judge that had made this decision about the perfect grants? You need to pat him on the back. It's Judge Russell, the same Judge Russell that excluded the evidence in the Uribe case. I'm telling you, something's happening here, which I have yet been unable to figure out. Maybe if I get the transcripts, I can. But there's additional historical research in the legal area in order to track down how we got to be grantees and descendants with property within the Borrego land grant. I'll continue to quote from Justice Gaines' opinion in the Uribe case. First, with respect to whether the plaintiff has the right to sue because he had only had office surveys and not actual surveys. That's pretty important, right? The state doesn't send its representatives to actually survey the land to see if somebody is there. Maybe they don't want to know. Question. Justice Gaines writes in the Uribe case, the office surveys are important and difficult questions which we find it unnecessary to decide. Why are they no longer necessary to decide? I'm going to leave that question unanswered at this time. With respect to the circumstantial evidence of the general visit to Laredo, which confirmed the existence of the grant, which had been excluded by Russell, Gaines writes, it shows that the deputation appointed by the viceroy in the year 1767, 10 years after the alleged grants, to lay out the town of Laredo, to assign it lots for public purposes and its ejidos, and to extend titles to the colonists and to the respective lots and porciones, not only recognized the grant to Borrego, but found it necessary to appropriate a part of that grant to the use of the colony. Here, the court is bringing in this evidence as it relates to what was excluded by Russell in the first case. At a later period, the validity of the grant was distinctly recognized by the governor of the state of Tamaulipas. Gaines concludes the defendant's failure to introduce this evidence of the general visit in the Uribe case makes no substantial difference. And it doesn't, because there was just enough. In deciding the Haynes case first, the Texas Supreme Court might have been intentionally trying to create legal precedent to establish not just the validity of the land grants with respect to Uribe and those other defendants on the 39,000 acres, but establishing a legal precedent to create validity for all of the successors of Borrego. In conclusion, Justice Gaines writes, the country on the Rio Grande, where the land in question is situated, has been swept by successive revolutions and harried by the incursion of hostile savages. The seat of government of the province and state to the jurisdiction of which that section of the country has been subject has been repeatedly changed. Upon the establishment of the independence of Texas, the archives relating to the title in dispute became foreign to our jurisdiction. And under such circumstances, it's not remarkable that the defendant should be unable to produce either the original muniments or authenticated copies of a title which emanated, if at all. And I think there is still some sneaky suspicion here that maybe it wasn't a perfect grant. Okay, nearly a century and a half ago, it is to such a case that the doctrine of the presumption of a grant is peculiarly applicable. And we are of the opinion that the evidence, whatever there was in the Uribe case, inevitably to that conclusion that there were grants, that the lands in controversy are titled and were not subject to distribution by the state of Texas. The Supreme Court affirmed the lower court decision, and in so doing, stopped what appears to be executive overreach by the Texas General Land Office. That concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Yes, Primo. I'm sorry? Well, it's not specific. It's not, and that's why we need the transcript. They never lost a single acre. But without these two decisions, the validity of the porciones, because the grants were ultimately, and yes, we speak about the porciones as being the grant, but the porciones, I think, are not the original grant. They simply, from the point of the grant, they start being divided. So there is, to my knowledge, and probably to my knowledge, the grants don't exist except maybe in Mexico. Yes, sir. I don't know. It takes a lot of time to do a lot of research. Just putting down these notes, taking me about 10 days to read through these two decisions. The two opinions. Interestingly, if you want to read a lot of the history, you're going to find a lot more in the von Rosenberg case than you are in the Uribe case. The Uribe case is short by in my opinion, it's way shorter than, I think it's like 4 or 5 pages long, whereas the von Rosenberg case is better documented and states out all of the history of the time. No. They were both filed in Laredo. They were both tried by Judge Russell, but the Rosenberg von Haynes case was tried in the subsequent term. That's the terminology that is used by the Supreme Court justice. The subsequent term, which means maybe a year afterwards. And yet, the von Rosenberg case gets to the Supreme Court in the decision-making process, and they're brought together because the court applies not just the decision of the von Rosenberg case, which includes the same defendants. It's decided, and it creates a legal precedent that now is going to be used by the Texas Supreme Court. So the Texas Supreme Court is making a decision. There's about what it wants the law to be from that point on. That's the purpose of judicial precedent. It can be overruled in the future, like the abortion issue, just a complete overturning. There's another question about that I have that remains unanswered and should be researched. What happens if what would have happened if the railroad company had actually come down, or the General Land Office, and done the actual surveys? Because Judge Russell in the first case said, no, I think what the Supreme Court wanted to do was say, that's not right, because if they had done that, they would have had the right to sue. That's why the Supreme Court says, no, you don't have the right to sue even. But even if, and Russell in the trial case says, whatever little evidence he allows to come in is saying that the 150 years of continuous, uninterrupted possession of the land is the most important thing that gives credibility to the presumption of existence of a valid grant that is in Mexico, and the original duplicate probably being destroyed in an 1828 fire, or who knows what happened to it. No, it's the Tex-Mex Railroad runs from Corpus Christi to Laredo, right along Highway 44. I don't know. I do believe it was a Texas corporation. There's a connection. There's a connection. But whether it's a Mexican railroad company or not, it's a company, and in most likelihood, a corporation. It doesn't have the right to take property that is already equitably owned. That's the 150 years. What does equitable mean? It means fair. Yes. Well, that's right. But they would have had to do it. Yeah, they would have to prove it. And they would have had to do it, but it would have given, with adverse possession, every single individual, it would have been in every single case. Every single individual rancher would have had a lawsuit, which is extremely difficult. And from, let's say, the perspective of judicial efficiency, not very judicially efficient. It would have been a free-for-all. and probably fairly chaotic. Well, I know we have to give up this room.
All right, we're running a little bit over. We promised to keep you here from 10 to 12, but I think it's 1 o'clock. Yeah, if I had known it was going to go this long, we would have had lunch for everybody. But we're going to begin a closing here, not terribly formal. But did you have something else to say, Mr. Car- Okay, good. Yeah, so I think that the questions that should be taken now should be done, I think, just in your own on your own time privately, because I think that people will be hanging around for a little bit. I think, Lali, if you could just lower the volume on yes, thank you. So I just want to thank all of you for coming, and I think that there's clearly a great set of experiences that create this complexity for the history of this region. As Mr. Uribe was presenting, I was reminded of another Supreme Court case, the Brownsville versus Cavazos case of 1871, over the legitimacy of Brownsville. And so that's a very, very complex case, just like this is a very complex case, because the history of this place is mired with all kinds of complexities, political, economic, and then the train comes, and that adds to the complexity of it. And so with that, we just encourage you to engage in further dialogue. I think there's all kinds of interest here. Thank you, Diana, for helping to organize this. Dr. Peña, thank you so much for helping to organize this. And Laura, thank you for helping us set it up. And to all of you, Mr. Martinez y todos los demás también, muchas gracias. Thank you for coming to the museum.